A general presentation of the way to proceed. Proceed along the path on the basis of meditative serenity, a specific presentation on the way to proceed along the path, which has two. The need to achieve meditative serenity before proceeding on the path bearing the aspects of calmness and coordinates on the basis of the meditative serenity, the way to freedom from attachment or to desire RAM. Regarding the first, a general presentation of the way to proceed along the path on the basis of meditative question. Should you simply sustain non-discursive awareness characterized by clarity, non-discursive, etc., by achieving attention and tailing non-discursive concentration, as explained previously? Producing such concentrations in your mind stream is for the purpose of generating insight that overcomes afflictions. Hence, if you do not generate insight on the basis of this concentration, you should you will be unable to eliminate even the afflictions of the desire realm, no matter how much you grow accustomed to that concentration. In that case, what need is there, even to mention eliminating all afflictions, therefore cultivate insight. Furthermore, there are two kinds of insight. Insight proceeding by the mundane path, which eliminates manifest afflictions, and insight proceeding by the supramundane path, which eradicates the seeds of afflictions. There is no means of proceeding on a higher path other than these two. Asanga's Shravaka level states that's the yogi, etc. Therefore, one who has achieved a meditative serenity or attention may cultivate either the insight of the mundane path or the insight that proceeds by the supramundane path. Whichever you wish to cultivate, you must frequently cultivate the serenity achieved previously. So last year there was a Mind and Life conference in Delhi, and during that time there were a few non-Buddhist Hindu and Jain scholars who had participated, and one person from the Ramakrishnan mission actually gave his talk about how the mind actually develops from the coarser level to the subtler level and becoming subtler and subtler. And when he made his presentation, it sounded like he was talking about the four empty states, which we find in the highest yoga tantra, where the mind becomes subtler and subtler. So that was the first time I heard a non-Buddhist presentation about the degrees of subtlety within the mind that you can develop. And I think that probably the subtle mind that he was explaining cannot be the subtle mind that is found that we find in the highest yoga tantra, but it could be the subtle states of mind which were earlier we found mentioned in the Shravaka levels. So it was quite profound presentation that he made. And so it's very clear from that these kind of mental states, subtle mental states, are something which are commonly achieved by Buddhist and non-Buddhist. So and when you practice in this way, pliancy and mental one-pointedness greatly increase, and serenity also becomes much more stable. Moreover, you become knowledgeable about the signs of serenity and insight, and therefore you strive at whichever of the two paths you want. The Shravaka level says, in regard to this, the novice yogis who are endowed with attention reflect, I shall proceed either the mundane or supramundane path, and they frequently apply themselves to this attention, commensurate with how much they pass the days and nights in frequent practice. The appliance in mental one-pointedness increase, expand, and are broadened. When their attention becomes firm, stable, and solid, when it engages pure objects at will, and when it is imbued with the signs associated with serenity and insight at that time, they strive at their practice along with the mundane path and the supramundane path, whichever they wish to follow. So mundane insight consists of meditation bearing the aspects of calmness and coarseness, in which you observe the coarseness of the lower levels, and the calmness of the higher levels. So permanent insight, as stated in the Shiravaka levels, consists of meditation which observes the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, including impermanence and so on. Principally, you cultivate the view, which is knowledge of selflessness of person. What kind of person achieves the attention of serenity, explained previously, and does not proceed by the supramundane path in that lifetime, but proceeds by the mundane path? The Shravaka level states what person proceeds. So here there's differentiation between this, the subtlety between the selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena. Not by the supramundane path. There are the following 4 types of persons. All those who are, number 1, all those who are not Buddhists, and number 2, those who adhere to Buddhist teaching, but while they have practiced serenity well, are of full dull faculties, and similarly those who are of the sharp faculties, but those roots of virtue have not matured, and bodhisattvas who wish to achieve enlightenment in the future, but not in this life. In that regard, all non-Buddhist yogis who have achieved the meditative serenity we explained earlier do not use discerning wisdom to sustain an analysis of the selflessness of the person, for they are not drawn to selflessness. Therefore, they either sustain non-discursive meditative serenity alone, or they cultivate just the insight bearing this aspect of calmness and coarseness. So according to the through the non-Buddhist philosophical assertions, what the practitioners themselves actually do is they actually intensify and reinforce the grasping at the self of a person, which the innate one is further reinforced through reasonings and rationally, and therefore they either and so. I have a friend. I had a friend, a Bihari Indian monk, who used to be a professor of a university, and later he became a Buddhist, and he took ordination from me. One day, we talked about selflessness, and. There is no self which is like which actually governs the body and the mind, like a lord over the body and mind. As I said his whole body shook, and he said, if there is no self, then how can there be someone creating karma and experiencing its results? And so he was totally frightened by that. But then I talked to him about interdependent nature of things, and then explained what emptiness meant, and then his fear also subsided. And so there are those who actually hold on to a self which is separate from the body and the mind. And when you have a very strong clinging to this, then when you say there is no self, they think that you are actually talking about nihilism. So in this way, they proceed solely by the mundane path. If you are a practitioner of this teaching, a Buddhist, but have dull faculties, so they by seeing the shortcomings of the desire ram, sensual objects of the desire ram, they actually practice they practice chastity and live a very humble life like a monk. And so these are really great, good practitioners also. But have dull faculties and have previously been deeply habituated to the stabilizing meditation of serenity alone, you will not be interested in meditation which investigates the meaning of selflessness with discerning wisdom. Or even if you are interested due to an inability to understand the meaning of selflessness, you will proceed in this life solely by the mundane path. This is because you either sustain the stability of serenity alone, or you cultivate just the insight bearing the aspects of calmness and coarseness. Even if you are a Buddhist of sharp faculties who has comprehended the meaning of selflessness, if your roots of virtue for conceptually knowing the truth have not matured in this life, you will still be unable to generate the supreme and undefiled noble path. In this case, it is said that you will proceed by the mundane path alone, but not that you are unable to cultivate insight focused on selflessness. Consider bodhisattvas who are bound to one more birth before Buddhahood, and who during their next lifetime, their final rebirth in cyclic existence will produce in their mind stream the four paths, beginning with the path of preparation. While they are still bound to one more birth, they are unable to generate the noble path. So it is said that in this lifetime they proceed by the mundane path, but not that they fail to know the meaning of selflessness. Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge states, for our teacher and the Rhinoceros, like Pratyeka Buddhas, all paths from preparation to enlightenment are on the one last meditative stabilization. Prior to that are the eight to liberation, the path of accumulation. This accords with the way of achieving Buddhahood taught in the Hinayana treatises, but it is not the Mahayana interpretation of the noble master's Asanga. Therefore, non-Buddhists who eliminate manifest afflictions by meditating on the path bearing the aspects of calmness and coarseness, as well as Buddhists who radically eliminate afflictions by meditating on the meaning of selflessness, must first of all achieve the concentration of meditative serenity explained earlier. So the serenity explained above is needed by non-Buddhist and Buddhist yogis as the basis of eliminating afflictions. Furthermore, yogis of either Mahayana or the Hinayana must also achieve this concentration. And even among the Mahayana practitioners, all yogis of perfection must also achieve meditative serenity. So this serenity is extremely important as the basis for proceeding along the path of all yogis. So moreover, serenity The serenity explained in the Tantric text contains certain differences in methods for generating concentration and in objects of meditation, such as focusing on divine form, on the hand implements of the chosen deities, and so on. So such as, or so on, refers to the syllables and the chakras and so forth. But apart from those, they are entirely alike in terms of the need to eliminate the 5 faults of concentration, including laziness and so on, in terms of the means of cultivating their antidotes, such as mindfulness, vigilance, and so on, and in terms of the achievement of the 9 mental states and ensuing occurrence, appliance, etc. So this concentration is very widespread. With this in mind, the Sutra Unraveling the Intention states that all Mahayana and Hinayana concentration are included within the concentration of serenity and insight. Thus, you who wish to be skilled in concentration should become skilled in serenity and insight. And then next. Although there are many purposes for developing this concentration, the chief purpose is for the sake of developing the knowledge of insight. Moreover, in terms of insight, there are 2 kinds: that which bears the aspect of calmness and coarseness, which eliminates only manifest afflictions, and which is common to Buddhists and non-Buddhists. And that which is common to Buddhists, both Mahayana practitioners and Hinayana practitioners, that is insight bearing the aspect of the reality of selflessness, which utterly eliminates the seat of afflictions. This last is a unique quality of Buddhists. The former is a luxury, not something indispensable, while the latter is an indispensable element. So those aspiring for freedom should produce the insight that comprehends the reality of our selflessness. Then page 95. So there is a quotation, verse, some lines. Those opposed to your teaching are blinded by delusion. Even after venturing to the peak of cyclic existence, suffering occurs again and cyclic existence is maintained. Those who follow your teaching, even if they do not achieve actual meditative stabilization, to turn away from cyclic existence. This under the steady gaze of, while under the steady gaze of eyes of Mara. Therefore, the meditative serenity that serves as the basis for the insight that achieves the noble path of all stream enterers and once returners is the serenity explained earlier, which is included in the access to the first meditative stabilization. Similarly, know that all arhats who simultaneously eliminate the afflictions become arhats by cultivating insight on the basis of meditative serenity explained earlier. If you do not first establish in your mind stream the concentration of serenity explained previously, it is not possible for the actual knowledge of insight, which is focused on either the real nature or the diversity of all phenomena, to arise. This will be discussed later on. Therefore, while yogis in the highest Yoga Tantra tradition may not develop the insight bearing the aspect of calmness and coarseness, which focuses on the diversity of all phenomena, or the serenity generated by this insight, they must develop serenity. Moreover, the point at which serenity first arises in terms of the stages of generation and the stage of completion is during the first of these two. In summary, you must first develop serenity, and then on this basis you may proceed on a graduated path up to the peak of cyclic existence by means of insight bearing the aspects of calmness and coarseness, or you may proceed along the 5 paths of liberation or omniscience by means of insight bearing the aspects of reality of selflessness. This constitutes the general seal of the Congress teaching. So yogi can depart from the preceding is the general presentation of the way to proceed from high to higher paths on the basis of meditative serenity. And next, here there are 2 sections that need to achieve meditative serenity before proceeding on the path bearing the aspects of calmness and coarseness, and on the basis of meditative serenity, the way to freedom from attachment to the desire ram. And regarding the first, one who cultivates the path bearing the aspects of calmness and coarseness by way of discernment of characteristics must first achieve the meditative serenity explained earlier. For the ornament for Mahayana Sutra says, upon increasing this concentration and increasing it further, the yogi achieves actual meditative stabilization. This states that one who has achieved the previously explained ninth mental state, together with pliancy increases this concentration and thereby achieves actual meditative stabilization. Moreover, from the time of the 9th mental state up until you achieve the attention of the discernment of the characteristics, you are said to attain a beginner at attention. Once you have achieved the attention of discernment of characteristics, you cultivate it out of a desire to purify afflictions, you are said to attain a beginner at purifying afflictions. So one who cultivates the discernment of characteristics first achieves attention, serenity. And then the Shravaka levels states, a beginner attention is a beginner while not attaining attention, which with respect to one-pointedness on the aspect of calmness, and until reaching one-pointedness. A beginner at purifying afflictions occurs after attaining this attention and begins with the attainment of the attention of the discernment of characteristics, and attention which desires to purify the mind from the afflictions and its familiarization with this practice. Also, at the beginning of the 4th section, it is said that you cultivate the mundane and supramental parts of detachment after you have achieved attention. This very extensive explanation in the Shravaka level of the process of eliminating afflictions by first accomplishing the serenity explained above and then achieving mundane and supramental insight does not clearly appear in other treatises on knowledge. Former scholars who were learned in the earlier higher and lower texts on knowledge also have not clearly articulated this process of eliminating afflictions on the basis of first accomplishing one-pointed serenity. Therefore, if you have not understood well this explanation in the Shravaka levels, you might have the following mistaken ideas. The lowest stage on the path of the meditative stabilization of the form realm and the meditative absorption of the formless realm is the access to the first stabilization, And the first of the 6 types of attention explained with respect to this is the discernment of a characteristic. Therefore, the discernment of the characteristics is a state of mind at the beginning of the access. It is very incorrect to hold such a view. For these reasons, without achieving serenity, you have no way to produce access to the first meditative stabilization. And number 2, if you do not achieve this access, you will not achieve serenity. And number 3, since discernment of characteristics consists of analytical meditation, by cultivating it, you will not be able to really accomplish the serenity that you have not achieved earlier. According to the quotation from the levels of the yogic deeds cited earlier, there is no pliancy in one-pointedness within the desire realm. And the sutra unraveling the intention and so on state that if you do not achieve pliancy, you will not accomplish serenity. Thus, if you do not achieve the first access state, you will not achieve serenity. Therefore, the first of the 6 types of the attention of the first access state is the entrance to cultivating the insight, including the access state. But it is not right at the beginning of the first access state, for it must be preceded by the serenity that is included in the access state. All states of concentration prior to the achievement of the concentrations included in the first access state are solely mental one-pointedness in the desire realm. So, if you adhere to the explanation in the classic text, there are very few who achieve even serenity, let alone insight. And next, once you have become familiar with just the familiar meditative serenity explained earlier, which bears this many attributes of clarity, non-discursiveness, awareness, etc., if you do not cultivate either of the 2 kinds of insight, you will not be able to suspend even the manifest afflictions of the desire realm. In that case, what need is there to mention eliminating seeds of afflictions and cognitive obscurations? Therefore, if you wish to achieve the first stabilization, which is free of attachment to the desire realm, cultivate insight on the basis of that serenity. Well, why does this not contradict the earlier statement that if you become accustomed to serenity alone, you will suppress manifest afflictions? There is no problem, for the earlier explanation subsumed mundane insight under the category of meditative serenity. But this explanation refers to serenity that is included in the first class access state and that precedes both types of insight. Moreover, with respect to the insight that accomplishes freedom from attachment, there are the 2 ways of freeing yourself. One, by means of insight, bearing the aspect of the truth, and the other by the insight that bears the aspect of calmness and coarseness. This present discussion is a presentation of the way to accomplish freedom from attachment by way of a letter of these 2 paths. So in this regard, with regard to this, the persons who cultivate it are both non-Buddhist, who utterly lack the view of selflessness, and the followers of this teaching, Buddhists, who have the view of selflessness. The type of path they cultivate in order to eliminate afflictions accord with the teachings of Shravaka levels. For the sake of freedom from the desire of realm, diligent yogis use the 7 types of attention and subsequently achieve their freedom. The 7 types of attention are the attention of the discernment of characteristics, arising from belief, isolation, delight or withdrawal, analysis, final application, and the result of final application. Among those, the final one is the attention at the time of entering the actual state of meditative stabilization upon being freed from attachment to the desire realm. So, this is what is to be accomplished, while the former 6 are what accomplishes it. If in this case you are not eliminating the afflictions through meditation on the meaning of selflessness, then what kind of thing are you establishing, and then meditating on to eliminate the afflictions? Although other manifest afflictions of the desire realm are eliminated with this path, bearing the aspect of calmness and coarseness, the phrase "to free yourself from attachment to the desire realm" refers chiefly to eliminating attachment by way of its antidote. Moreover, attachment refers here to the yearning for and attachment to the 5 sensory objects of the desire realm. The antidote to this is to regard sensory objects as disadvantages in a multitude of ways. By thus adhering to the opposite of the mode of apprehension of attachment, and then accustoming yourself to it, you become free from attachment to the desire ram. Furthermore, you may have the firm certainty of the discernment of characteristics and unmistaken discernment of the faults of the desire ram and the good qualities of first meditative stabilization. Nevertheless, if you have not already accomplished serenity, you will not be able to eliminate afflictions, no matter how familiar you become with its distinguishing between those faults and good qualities. Moreover, even if you have achieved serenity, if you do not analyze with discernment, however much you cultivate serenity, you will not be able to eliminate afflictions. Thus, you must eliminate them by way of cultivating both serenity and insight. This is the procedure of every elimination of afflictions. In that case, the 7 types of attention are described as follows. The knowledge of characteristics is in which one distinguishes between the faults and the disadvantages of the lower and the higher levels. Entails the integration of study and reflection by means of mental states arisen from study on some occasions and those arisen from reflection on other occasions. Number 2, by familiarizing yourself in this way, you will exclusively believe in the objects of calmness and coarseness by way of meditation that transcends study and reflection, and this is attention arisen from belief. In this regard, the Shravaka level states, focusing on that very sign, you cultivate coarseness and calmness, you cultivate serenity and insight. And even in the passage concerning the 6th attention, there is reference to cultivating serenity and insight. The passage on this first attention speaks of focusing on the 6 elements, including the meaning, and in other passages, this focusing is frequently referred to as insight. Hence, even though this does not entail cultivating a view of self-existence, it is insight. Thus, in the context of these types of attention, you eliminate afflictions that after you have meditated by way of both serenity and insight. Here is how you cultivate the 2. You cultivate insight by repeatedly analyzing the distinct object of calmness and coarseness, and at the conclusion of this analysis, you cultivate serenity by one-pointedly focusing on these objects of calmness and coarseness. The second and first types of attention in such meditation are the antidote to disillusionment. So we are. And then there is the isolated attention and the description of the attention of isolated attention of delight or withdrawal, analytical attention, attention of the final application and the result of the final, and its result. And then the last, here I say these verses, Master Tsongkhapa wrote, profound are the description of the stages for achieving concentration, well taught in the sutras and the great commentaries. Those of little intelligence do not precisely comprehend them, projecting. So although these verses are written at the end of the calm abiding or meditative serenity, at the end of this section, these verses can be applied to other parts. Those of little intelligence projecting the faults of their own minds upon others' thinking. There are no instructions, therefore, for sustaining non-discursive awareness. They do not look for them in texts that have them, and they think they have found them after diligently seeking them where they do not exist. Such people fail to distinguish between even the concentrations of Buddhist and non-Buddhist. What need then is there to mention their precisely distinguishing the difference between the concentration of Mahayana Hinayana and the Vajrayana Paramitayana. Seeing this situation, I have explained in simple words the way to sustain concentration as taught in the class 6, and so forth, and through to the end. Middle length Lamrim, 236. Should someone who has thus achieved attention and the non-conceptual meditative we are at this on page 236, general indication of how to traverse the path. Traverse the path in dependence on calm abiding. Should someone who has thus achieved attention, the non-conceptual meditative disposition explained above, sustain just that non-conceptuality characterized by clarity, non-conceptuality, and so forth, such meditative civilization having been generated in the mental continuum is for the sake of generating special insights that destroys the mental afflictions. Therefore, if special insight does not arise independent on it, however much you familiarize yourself with meditative civilization, you will not even be able to abandon the mental afflictions of desire, and not to mention the mental afflictions as a whole. For that reason, it is necessary to cultivate special insight. In fact, there are two: the special insight that progresses along mundane paths, abandoning manifest afflictions, and the special insight that progresses along supramundane paths, abandoning the seeds of afflictions from the root. The former is the meditation with the coarse and peaceful aspects of the viewing lower levels as coarser and higher ones as more peaceful. The latter is a meditation of the view with 16 aspects in impermanence and so forth in regarding the four truths. Both are set forth in Shravaka levels, the principal one being the view that realizes selfness of persons. That being so, anyone non-Buddhist who abandon manifest afflictions by cultivating the path with coarse and peaceful aspects, the Buddhists who abandon afflictions from the root by meditating on the meaning of selfness require the calm abiding explained above as the basis for abandoning afflictions of both non-Buddhist and Buddhist yogis. Not only that, but any Mahayana or Hinayana yogis must accomplish that calm abiding. Or the stabilization. As for Mahayanis, again, all Mantrayana and Paramitayana yogis must accomplish that calm abiding. Therefore, this calm abiding is crucial as the basis of progress on the path of all yogis. For Buddhists, it is not unacceptable to lack the former of those two special insight, but the latter special insight that realizes substance is an element whose lack is unacceptable. Which is indispensable. In fact, if you attain the calm abiding explained above, next indication of how to traverse mundane paths in particular. Here, Shravaka level explains that from the ninth mind mental state to you are a beginner in attention as long as you have not achieved attention, whereas one who has achieved attention and out of desire to purify mental afflictions cultivates the attention that individually knows the characteristics is a beginner in purifying afflictions. If this point explained in Shravaka levels is not ascertained properly, the false impression will arise that the lowest of the paths of concentration and formlessness is the preparatory stage of the first concentration, and that the first mind that arises included in the preparatory stage is the individual recognition of characteristics, because the individual recognition of the characteristics is the first of 6 attentions that are discussed in that regard. It is inadmissible to hold this because there is no way for the preparatory stage of the first concentration to arise like that without calm abiding having been achieved. So, short, concise Lamrim, songs of experience. So we were Concentration is the king that rules the mind down. So one-pointed concentration alone does not have the faculty to cut samsara. That verse, I, the yogi, have practiced in this way. You who aspire to liberation do the same, should do the same. So those verses are covered. Lamp for the path to enlightenment. So verses 41 down, 42 down. 48, verse 49. I think it's not produced from itself, not from another also not from both, nor causelessly either. Thus it does not exist inherently by way of its own entity. Verse number 50. Moreover, when all phenomena are examined as to whether they are one or many, they are not seen to exist by way of their own entity, and thus are ascertained as not inherently existent. The reasoning of the 70 stanzas on emptiness, the treatise on the middle way, and so forth, explain that the nature of all things is established as emptiness. Since there are a great many passages, I have not cited them here, but have explained just that their conclusions for the purpose of meditation. Verse number 53. Thus, whatever is meditation on self, by not observing inherent nature in phenomena, is the cultivation of wisdom. Just as wisdom does not see an inherent nature of phenomena, in phenomena having analyzed wisdom itself by reasoning, meditate on that non-conceptuality, the nature of this worldly existence, which has come from conceptualizing it, is conceptuality. Thus, the elimination of conceptuality is the highest state of nirvana. And therefore, the Sabtu also has said that the great ignorance of conceptuality makes us fall into the ocean of cyclic existence, resting. So we'll stop at verse number 54, actually, which ends with meditate on that non-conceptuality. Chapter 7 of Lamrim, how to train in insight. As I've explained, meditative serenity has the features of non-discursiveness, clarity, benefit, and benefit. However, you should not be satisfied with just this. Rather, developing the wisdom that properly determines the meaning of reality, you must cultivate insight. Otherwise, since mere concentration is something Buddhists have in common with even the non-Buddhists, its cultivation, as with non-Buddhist paths, will not get rid of the seeds of afflictions. Hence, it will not free you from cycling existence, as Kamalai Shila's first stages of meditation says. So the phrase, although worldly persons cultivate concentration, means that worldly persons cultivate concentration without features such as non-discursiveness and clarity as explained above. The line, they do not destroy the notion of a self, means that despite cultivation, that concentration, cultivating that concentration, they cannot eliminate the conception of self. Afflictions return and disturb them indicates that worldly persons will still produce afflictions because they have not eliminated the conception of self. What kind of meditation leads to liberation? As cited earlier, the very next verse of the King of Concentration Sutra says, if you analytically discern the lack of self in phenomena, and if you cultivate that analysis in meditation, this will cause the resultant attainment of nirvana. There is no peace through any other means. The first line sets out the condition. If after you have analytically discerned phenomena which are selfless, you do develop the wisdom that understands the meaning of selflessness. The second line, and if you cultivate that analysis in meditation, refers to sustaining and cultivating in meditation the philosophical view of selflessness that you have gained. The third line means that this is the cause of attaining the goal, nirvana or liberation. Liberation is attained through cultivating that wisdom. Can you also attain liberation without that wisdom by cultivating some other path? The fourth line of this passage says there is no peace through any other means, meaning that even were you to cultivate another path, you would not quell suffering and afflictions without that wisdom. This scripture very clearly teaches that only the wisdom of selflessness severs the root of cycling existence. Kamala Shila quotes in his second stages of meditation in order to discredit the assertions of the Chinese abbot Hashang. Therefore, you must have certain knowledge of this, for even non-Buddhist sages have many good qualities such as concentration and super knowledge, but since they do not have the view of selflessness, they cannot escape cyclic existence at all. In this way, the scriptural collection of the Bodhisattvas cited earlier says, one who is satisfied with mere concentration, not understanding the reality explained in the scriptures, might develop an inflated sense of pride, mistaking mere concentration for the path of meditation on the profound meaning. Consequently, such a person will not become free from cyclic existence. The teacher himself explains clearly what he meant. Listening to others means to hear the explanation of selflessness from another person. Therefore, it is unquestionable that Buddha spoke of listening to others in order to refute the idea that you can develop the view of selflessness from within yourself without study and reflection that go along with listening to an excellent external spiritual guide explain the meaning of selflessness generally. Among all Conqueror's scriptures, there are some that explicitly teach about reality, and even those that indirectly point toward it. The darkness of confusion is not overcome until the knowledge of reality dawns, but it is overcome when that knowledge arises. Therefore, meditative serenity, one-pointedness of mind, does not in itself become pure sublime wisdom, nor does it overcome the darkness of confusion. Hence, there is no doubt that you must seek wisdom. You should think, I will seek the wisdom that discerns the meaning of selflessness, reality. Kamala Shila's stages of meditation, the second stage of meditation says, then having achieved serenity, you should cultivate insight. You should think all the saying of the Bhagwan was spoken well, directly or indirectly. They all elucidate and point to reality. If I know reality, I will escape all of the entanglements of dogmatic views. Just as darkness is cleared away by the dawn, meditative serenity alone does not lead to pure sublime wisdom, nor will it clear away the darkness of the obscurations. However, if I use wisdom to meditate on reality, I will reach pure sublime wisdom and know reality. This part is finished, and next one, chapter 8. So, fulfilling the prerequisites for insight, you should listen to the standard textual systems, relying on a scholar who accurately understands the key points of the scriptures. And indispensable prerequisite to insight here, insight means the insight realizing selflessness. is to use the wisdom that gained through study and reflection to develop knowledge of reality. For without a decisive view of how things exist, you cannot develop an insight that knows the real nature, emptiness. Also, in seeking such a view, you must rely on that which has provisional meaning, but rather on that which is definitive. Therefore, you should differentiate between the provisional and definitive, and you should then internalize the meaning of the definitive scriptures. Moreover, if you do not rely upon the treatises by authoritative trailblazers commenting on the Buddha's thoughts, you are like a blind person headed toward danger without a guide. Hence, you must rely. So, as the Buddha was a very skillful, compassionate and skillful person, sometimes he taught as if to some people that there is some kind of a persons when he says the five aggregates are the burdens and the one who carries it is the person. And whereas at other times he said there is no self, but there are the aggregates. And then he also showed, gave other teachings in which he indicated that there are three vehicles leading to enlightenment, and in others he said there is only one final vehicle. And so all these are in accordance with the need of the predispositions of the disciples. He was not forcing his own understanding of reality onto his disciples, but he showed the path according to the need or the predispositions. So whatever the disciples can take, and he was giving these different teachings according to their needs. Therefore, within the sutras, there are those of the provisional and definitive meaning, which are those sutras which cannot be taken literally, and those that can be taken literally, respectively. So, regarding the perfection of wisdom teachings, where the Buddha says there is no intrinsic nature in the five aggregates, and there is no form and so forth, when you actually logically analyze the meaning, and this cannot be undermined as being the true truth. Whereas in certain teachings, when, for example, where according to the Chittamatra view, the Buddha gave teachings where he said things do not have any externality, but the mind has some essence or truth. But then, just as there is no external phenomena, if it is the case that the mind itself also cannot exist objectively or from its own side. So, regarding these provisional teachings, if you were to accept them literally, then there is always undermining of the meaning or the content from with reasoning, and therefore these sutras are interpreted as taken to be provisional. So if you do not rely upon the treatise of authoritative trailblazers commenting on the this rely upon authoritative trailblazers commenting on the Buddha's thought, you are like a blind person headed towards danger without a guide. So here it almost seems like indicating that you have to rely on the person, but this is not the case. As the Buddha said, talked about the four reliances, not to rely on the person, but the teaching and so forth. But if you actually examine the writings of these great masters like Nagarjuna and Asanga, then, of course, you will be able to confirm them to be authoritative masters. And so whether Master Asanga is an authoritative person or not should be judged by his text. his writings. Hence, you must rely on accurate commentaries on the Buddha's thought. So we have to rely on these texts, which actually open the eyes of intelligence within us. So we cannot resort only to scriptural authority, but we have to use reasoning. On that, what sort of commentator should you repent? You should rely on one whom the Bhagavan Buddha himself very clearly prophesied in many sutras and tantras as commentators on the heart of the teaching, the profound reality beyond all the extremes of existence and non-existence. He is the noble Nagarjuna, renowned in this world and in those beyond. Therefore, rely upon his text as you seek the view that is the knowledge of emptiness. With regard to these prerequisites for insight, there are three parts: identifying scriptures of provisional and definitive meaning, the history of commentary on Nagarjuna's intended meaning, and how to determine the philosophical view of emptiness. Regarding the first, those who wish to know reality must rely on conquerors' scriptures. However, due to the diversity of ideas among the Buddha's disciples, the sutra's scriptures vary. Hence, you might wonder what sort of scripture you should rely on in seeking the meaning of profound reality. You must know reality in reliance upon scriptures of definitive meaning. What sort of scripture is definitive, and what sort of what is provisional? So, according to other texts, there are different ways of differentiating between the provisional and interpretive meaning, interpretive scriptures of the Buddha. So here, according to the Madhyamaka tradition, these differences made on the basis of what is said in the teaching of Akshayamati Sutra, which is quoted here. What is sutra of definitive meaning? What are the sutras? What are sutras of definitive meaning? What are sutras of provisional meaning? Those sutras that teach so as to establish conventionalities are provisional. Those sutras that teach so as to establish the ultimate are definitive, called definitive. And those sutras that teach the way by way of various words and letters are called provisional. Those sutras that teach the profound reality, which is difficult to understand and difficult to know, are called definitive. Then how does a sutra teach conventionality as to be classified as provisional, and how does sutra teach the ultimate so as to be classified as definitive? This also is indicated by very clearly in the teachings of Akshayamati Sutra. Sutras called provisional are those that teach as though there were an honor where there is none, using various expressions: self, sentient beings, a living being, nourished being, and those are different synonyms for sentient beings, including nourished being, creature, person, humankind, human agent, experiencer. And so when these are said, we find as if there is something that is objectively there, that can be found as human and so forth. And so sutras called definitive are those that teach the doors of liberation, emptiness, silentness, wishlessness, no composition, no production, no cessation, up to no honors. This means that the definitive are those that teach selflessness, no production, and such by eliminating elaborations, while the provisional are those that teach self and others, and so forth. Therefore, you should understand that no self, no production, and such are the ultimate, while production and so forth are the conventional. The King of Concentration Sutra also says, understand an instance as instances of definitive sutras, those that teach in accordance with the emptiness explained by the Sugata. Understand as of provisional meaning of all those teachings that posit a sentient being, a person, or living being. Also, Kamalashala's Illumination of the Middle Way says, therefore you should understand that only those that discuss the ultimate are the definitive meaning, the others are provisional meaning. Also, the ornament of the light of wisdom that introduces the object of all Buddhas says that the definitive object is the ultimate, and also the teaching of Akshayamati Sutra teaches that the absence of production and so forth are definitive. Consequently, it is certain that only the absence of production and so forth are called ultimate. Therefore, the collections of Madhyamaka arguments as well as the commentaries on them are considered texts that precisely teach the definitive, because they demonstrate at length the meaning of the ultimate that is free from all the masses of elaborations, such as production and cessation. Why are teachings called provisional or definitive? A text is called definitive or definitive meaning of definitive meaning because it cannot be interpreted to mean something else. Its meaning is the end point of the process of making the determinations, insofar as it is the meaning of reality itself. So what is the text? A common Laisha's illumination of meaning says, what is the text of divinity? It is one that gives an explanation in terms of the ultimate and is supported by valid cognition, for it cannot be interpreted by someone else as having any other contrary meaning. Implicitly, this statement allows you to understand the provisional. The provisional, or that which requires interpretation, is a text that cannot be taken to mean exactly what it says. Rather, you must explain what it intends, interpreting it as having some other meaning, or it is a text that can be taken literally, but in which this literal meaning is not the final reality, and you must still seek that reality as something other than the conventional phenomena to which the text refers. Since sutras of definitive meaning are literal, when statements such as production does not exist and persons do not exist appear in those sutras, one must conclude that production and person do not exist at all. Otherwise, those sutras would not be literal, and it would absurdly follow that they are provisional. This does not seem tenable because there are many definitive sutras in which the Buddha, the teacher who makes these statements, adds the qualification ultimately when refuting production and so forth. If he adds such qualification once, then we must add it even where it does not occur, because it is a common attribute of all such refutations. Since the absence of ultimate existence is the reality of phenomena, how could a sutra teaching this not be definitive? Otherwise, if these sutras did refute production in the general sense, then as far as particulars, they would also refute words, and hence even the definitive sutras that teach this could not make their presentations. Therefore, you should understand that the sutra or the treatise may still be definitive, even if what it teaches in a few isolated phrases cannot be read literally when stripped from the context of the general system surrounding it in that scripture. You also should understand that even when the teaching of the very word of the text can be taken literally, the text may still be provisional. So next, the history of commentary on Nagarjuna's intended meaning. So here the division between the Madhyamakas into Savatantrika and Madhyamaka Prasangika are explained. So all are followers of the Master Nagarjuna and his disciple, spiritual chief, spiritual disciple, Aryadeva, such as masters Bhaviveka Buddha Palita, Bhaviveka Chandrakirti, Chandarakshita. Broadly speaking, there were some Indian Tibetan masters who claimed that Madhyamaka to be Madhyamakas who used this kind of terminology for dividing Madhyamakas. However, here I'm to establish on the system of the great Madhyamakas who are followers of the master of Nagarjuna, who could explain every subtle distinction. Moreover, the great translator. So regarding Chandarakshita, he from amongst the Madhyamakas, he was one who established his own Madhyamaka tradition of Madhyamaka, Savatantrika Madhyamaka, and he was invited to Tibet by the Tibetan emperors and was a great master, excellent master. So the division between Savatantrika and the Prasankika is in accord with the Prasanapada, the clear word of Chandrakirti. So 117 finished. Now how to train in special insight, the middle length Lamrim 238. So it is indispensable rely on prerequisite of special insight, a general presentation of how to rely on prerequisite of special insight. The stages of meditation 2 sets forth the prerequisites of relying on holy beings, seeking to hear the Dharma from holy beings and reflecting on it properly. It is indispensable causal prerequisite of special insight to develop the view realizing sessions by means of wisdom, of hearing and reflecting, having heard the stainless text in dependence on experts who mistakenly know the essential points of the scriptures. This is because if you lack the view that has resolved the meaning of the mode of being, it will be impossible for the realization of special insight that realizes things as they are. Again, such view must be sought by one who is relying not on the interpretable meaning, but on the definitive meaning. Therefore, you need to understand the difference between the interpretable and definitive meaning and understand the meaning of the scripture, definitive meaning. Again, with this, if you do not rely on a treatise by one of great, valid, trailblazing founders, which elicit the Buddha's intention, you will be like a blind person without a guide. So this there's a more clarification here. The presentation is more clearer than the Lamrim Chemo. So from the point of view of how the ultimate is asserted, also the two names have been applied to those who assert the collection of the objects such as sprout and appearance, which lack true existence, to be ultimate truth. Proponents of the illusion establish illusion established by reasoning of consciousness, and those who assert the affirmative eliminated phenomena which eliminates the elaborations with respect to appearances. Page 240 now. To be of ultimate proponents through a non-abiding. The first of these were asserted to be masters such as Sandarakshit and Kamalashila. Some Indians also asserted the designations. The great treatises, next paragraph, the great treatises reveal the history of clarification in accordance with that, it says. So, however, although Master Chandrakirti asserts that external objects conventionally exist, it is unsuitable to call him a Sotrantika, because he does not conform to other proponents of the Tinet system. To assert that he accords with the Vaibhashika is also inadmissible. The scholars of the later propagation of teachings. So within the Madhyamaka, there are those who assert, who accept externality of things, and those who reject it. The scholars of later propagation of teaching in this land of snow mountains created two designations of Madhyamaka, Savatantrika, Madhyamaka, Pasangika, that accords with Chandrakirti's clear words. Therefore, the Madhyamakas are certain to be of two types, those who conventionally assert external objects and those who do not. When the names are applied from the point of view of how the view a certain emptiness is generated within the mental point continuum, they are also ascertained to be of two types, Prasangika and Savatantika Madhyamaka. So let us say the grace for tea. Yet following which of those masters do you seek the intentions of the notable father and his spiritual son, following the great elder who made Master Chandrakirti's system the main Madhyamaka system? The earlier great masters of these instructions also held to this system as the main one. Master Chandrakirti saw that among the commentators on fundamental treatise on the middle way, Buddha Palita had elucidated Arya Nagarjuna's intention completely. He based himself on that system, took a lot of good explanations also from Master Bhaviveka, refuted those that seemed slightly incorrect, and elucidated the intention of Arya Nagarjuna. Since the commentaries by these two masters, who are seen to be very outstanding with regard to explaining the text of the Noble Father and Son, the intentions of the Noble Father and Son will be settled here, following the footsteps of the masters of Buddha Palita, Masters Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti. 당분의 초래, 취주 당분의 초래, 쭈지쳐가. In particular, how the view is settled has two: identification. How to determine the philosophical view of emptiness. Lamrim chapter 9, page 119, has two parts: the stage of entry into reality, the actual determination of reality. Nirvana is the reality one seeks to attain, but what is nirvana? The entry into reality means the method for attaining it. Then how do you enter? The reality that you seek to attain, the embodiment of truth, is the total extinction of conceptions of both self and that which belongs to the self, specifically by stopping all the various internal and external phenomena from appearing as though they were reality itself, which they are not, along with the latent predispositions for such false appearances. So we talk about non-conceptuality and being free from elaborations or reification. When it comes to emptiness, so that which is, so the birth and cessation and so forth are not in the true nature, the ultimate nature of things, whereas they do exist conventionally. They do not have any objective existence, which we can, they cannot be pointed out as being this and that in the final analysis, whereas to us, suffering, pain, and all these things appear to have some kind of objective existence. And similarly, the external phenomena seem to have some kind of objective existence to us, performing their different functions. So the stages by which you enter that reality are as follows. First, having contemplated and in dismay the faults and disadvantages of such things, you should develop wish to be done with it. So here, the stages of stages by which we enter the reality are as follows. These show the four how to proceed by understanding the Four Noble Truths. So first, then understanding that you will not overcome it unless you overcome its cause. You search its roots, considering what might be the root of cause of cyclic existence. You will thereby become certain from the depths of your heart that the reifying view of perishing aggregates or ignorance acts as the root of cyclic existence. You then need to develop a sincere wish to eliminate it. And next, see that overcoming the reifying view of perishing aggregates depend upon developing the wisdom that knows that the self as thus conceived does not exist. You will then see that you have to refute that self. Be certain in that refutation, relying upon scriptures and lines of reasoning that contradict its existence and prove its non-existence. This is an indispensable technique for anyone who seeks liberation. After you have arrived at the philosophical view that discerns that the self and that which belongs to the self lack even a shred of intrinsic nature, you should accustom yourself to that. This will lead to attainment of the embodiment of the truth. And clear words says these. So if we assert that things do exist the way they appear to us, as if having some kind of objective existence, having some kind of a characteristic and nature. If this were to be objectively existent, then when we realize emptiness, that mind actually should be something which actually destroys the conventionality of things. And that is not true. Chandrakirti's these clear words also says, so Chandrakirti also says in clear words, yogis who wish to enter reality and who wish to eliminate all afflictions and faults examine the question, what does the cycling have as its roots? So, with regard to the four attributes of the origin of suffering, which are origin, the cause, the condition, and so forth. So if we look at things, form, and so forth, or internal experiences, we, without satisfying with the conventional way of existence, so when we go beyond that, then we seem to have some kind of make some kind of a reification about those things, and when afflictions arise in us, this is actually brought about by comes on the basis of grasping at true existence, which gives rise to attachment and anger. As I already said before, Sharya Deva says, just as the physical faculty pervades all physical sense faculties, likewise ignorance, the fundamental ignorance, also permeates all other afflictive emotions. And therefore, by overcoming this ignorance, the rest of the afflictions are overcome. And this should not just be left in words, but actually when you check these statements with your experience, then you'll be able to confirm So first, you should know how we produce the afflictions such as attachment and anger and so forth on the basis of the root, which is the grasping at true existence. So whereas experiences like compassion and so forth, when you think about that, just as I don't want suffering, I want happiness, likewise others also have the same wish. And so these are more or less based on aspirations that we have. But then when you talk about my relative or friend, and then you see them to be attractive and you develop this liking towards them, then the state of mind is slightly different from the intensity of grasping. It's slightly stronger than the previous state of mind. Of course, we can view things which are beautiful as beautiful and bad as bad. But when there is this attachment or aversion growing, then this state of mind actually goes further than merely perceiving the beauty or the ugliness. And there, what happens is that objects appear to have some kind of objective existence, and then we, in turn, cling to such a way of existence. And so we have to know all these from our own experience. So when they thoroughly investigate this, they see that cyclic existence has as its root reifying view of perishing aggregates, and they see that the self is object observed by that reifying view of the perishing aggregates. They see that not observing the self leads to eliminating the reifying view of perishing aggregates. So you do not see these aggregates as being merely a name, in other words. And that thorough eliminating that by so as it is said by Benjamin Lawson Chögyam, just stay in stay focused on this lack of having any objectivity in things. Once you gain certitude in it, then you should actually maintain it and develop that insight. So that we have the clinging to a self-sufficiently substantial existence of an I, and also clinging to a truly existent I. And so these should be confirmed from your own experience. So perishing, and that through eliminating that, all afflictions and faults are overcome. Hence, at the very beginning, they examine only the self, asking what is the self? That is the object of conception of self. The scripture sets forth many arguments refuting the intrinsic existence of a limitless number of individuals. However, when yogis initially engage in practice, they meditate in an abridged way, determining that both the self and that which belongs to the self lack intrinsic existence, intrinsic nature. The Master Buddha Palita says this, that this is the meaning of the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise. The Master Chandrakirti bases his commentary on this statement by Buddha Palita. Also, the teachings on the selflessness of a person in Chandrakirti's commentary on the middle way are just extended explanations of the 18th chapter of the Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise. Are you not teaching how to enter reality of Mayana? In that case, the reality that one seeks to attain cannot be a mere extinction of the conception of both self and that which belongs to it. Also, since a simple determination that both the self and that which belongs to it lack intrinsic nature does not entail determination that objects as distinct from persons lack self. It is wrong to posit it as the path for entering into reality. Reply. There's no problem here, for there are two types of total extinction of non-conception of both the self and that which belongs to it. Even Hinayans may have the first type, the utter elimination of the affliction, so that those afflictions will never recur. However, the second is the Buddha's embodiment of truth. And then the quotation from Chandrakirti's clear words. The self is imputed dependently. It is what those who have the error of ignorance cling to fiercely. It is regarded as the proprietor of the five aggregates. Those who seek liberation analyze whether this self has the character of the aggregates. When those who seek liberation have analyzed it in every way, they do not observe a self, and thus the fundamental treatise says, if the self does not exist, how could that which belongs to it, self, exist? Because they do not observe the self, they also do not at all observe the aggregates which belong to the self, the basis on which the self is designated. So when the chariot is burnt, its parts also are burnt and thus are not observed. Similarly, when yogis know that the self does not exist, they will know that what belongs to the self, the things that are the aggregates, are also devoid of the self. So the qualm and the reply, since we do not assert this, I will answer your final question. The awareness that knows that the person lacks intrinsic existence does not think. The aggregates do not intrinsically exist. However, without relying on anything else, that very awareness can induce a certain knowledge that the aggregates lack intrinsic existence.
On page number 123, Haribhadra's little commentary on the ornament of clear knowledge. If all phenomena were like dreams, then the 10 normal virtues, giving and so forth, will not exist. Hence, even when you are not asleep, it will be as though you were. Therefore, there is a huge disparity between an ascensionary system and a Madhyamaka system, which respect whether things exist either ultimately or conventionally. What they consider conventionally exist amounts to ultimate existence from a Madhyamaka perspective, and what they consider ultimately existent exists only conventionally according to Madhyamaka. Furthermore, although the imputedly existing person of this Buddha ascensionist and the imputedly existing person of the Master Chandrakirti are similar in them, their meanings are not the same. Hence, ascensionists do not know that the person does not ultimately exist. We're back to Lamrim, middle length Lamrim, page number 241. Middle length Lamrim, page number 241. In particular, how the view is settled, identification of afflicted ignorance. the antidotes to the other mental afflictions, such as attachment, taught by Victor, are partial antidotes, whereas the antidote to ignorance, he taught, becomes an antidote to all of them. Therefore, ignorance is the basis of all errors and faults. In clear word, it says, in the 9 divisions of the Buddha's teachings, based on 2 truths, such as the sets of sutras proclaim for the extensive contact with worldly beings, the one that were taught for the sake of removing attachment will not cause hatred to be exhausted, and those that were taught for the sake of removing hatred will not cause attachment to be exhausted. What was taught for the sake of exhausting pride will not overcome the other defilements. Therefore, they are not so pervasive. All the speeches are not of such great meaning. Those that were taught for the sake of exhausting delusion overcome all the mental afflictions. All the mental afflictions are thoroughly based on ignorance. That's what the victors taught. That being so, you must meditate on suchness as the antidote to ignorance. Moreover, unless you have undefined the ignorance, you will not know how to cultivate its antidote. Therefore, it is extremely important to identify ignorance. Page number 242. Ignorance is the opposite of knowledge, but knowledge, on the other hand, should not be taken as any knowledge. Rather, it is the wisdom knowing the suchness of selflessness. Its opposite is not suitable to be the mere absence of what wisdom or just something else. Therefore, it is its antagonist. It is a superimposition of self and more especially. The 2 superimpositions of a self of phenomena and of persons, the self of so both the apprehension of a self of phenomena and the apprehension of a self persons are ignored. The manner of superimposition is to apprehend that phenomena exist by way of their own entity, by way of their own character, or inherently. In this regard, it says in the question of Ubali Sutra that phenomena are posited by the power of conception. The various flowers that gladden the mind, the gold and the resplendent attractive mansions, both completely like a creator. They were posited by the power of conception. The world is imputed by the force of conception. And in 60 stanzas of reasoning, it also says, since the perfect Buddha said, the world is ignorance at its cause, why would it be invalid to say that this world is due to conception? The commentary on the meaning of this statement explains that the world are not established by way of their own entity, but are merely imputed by conception. In 400 stanzas, it also says, if in the absence of conception, desire and so forth do not exist, who with intelligence will unfold the intrinsic reality and conception? And in the commentary on these things that exist only through the existence of conception and do not exist without conception are without doubt ascertained to be unestablished by way of their own entity, like a snake imputed to a rope. This statement explains that from the point of view of being imputed while not being established, here, first we need to examine the reality nature of the phenomena and the persons through the logical reasoning of logical reasonings through cause and effect, and how the causes generate their effects, and how the effects of the results really happen from themselves. Then when we really search intrinsically, when we search further, since we cannot find them as existing by intrinsically, then we need to judge whether they are really existing or not. But conventionally, they are existing. So then we have to analyze or examine further. So how it appears to a person. So it appears as something which doesn't have any relation to the mind. So therefore, when things like illusions, when things appear to our mind, they have an appearance in mind. It appears that it exists from its own reality nature, but in reality they are not existing from themselves. So therefore they are merely designated by the names and the conceptual thought. But to our mind, it appears as it doesn't rely upon, or it is not been designated by the minds and the conceptual thoughts, but in reality it was just created by, or it was just designated by names and conceptual thoughts. This statement explains that from the point of view of being imputed while not being established by their own entities, attachment and so forth resemble a snake imputed to a rope. Then again, as I explained yesterday, the name or the title itself, as when we say that the phenomena things exist by just name, but the name itself does not have an intrinsic reality nature of existence. And since when we speak about the title of a name of phenomena, but the name which has been named for one phenomena, that the phenomena itself cannot be defined, so therefore that name itself does not exist by itself, the name of the title. Page number 243. For those reasons, the manner of apprehending things as truly existing, the object of negation is to apprehend them not as possessed by power of beginner's conception. Regarding the no-selflessness on phenomena and person, how it is being differentiated is the self as something which is the one who takes on the burden or which one undergoes the sufferings. Its referent object is the self or inherent existence. The non-existence of this with the person as the substratum is taught to be the selflessness of a person. Here, when we refer to as the term self or the I, it is not about the self or the I which we normally designate as I and others, self and the others. But here, it refers to the self which is the source, which is designated as existing from itself. As it is said that since all the phenomena and self existing by dependent on others, therefore it does not have an existence of its own reality. In the commentary on the 400 stanzas, it says, in this regard, the so-called self is an entity of things that does not depend on anything else, inherent existence. Its non-existence is selflessness. Owing to the division of phenomena and persons, it is understood as twofold, a selflessness of phenomena and a selflessness of persons. With respect to the observed object of the apprehension of self of persons, the commentary on the middle way explains that some Samithiyas has read part of the 5 aggregates and some as it only the mind to be the basis of the observed object of view of self. The self is something which has been designated and but the aggregates where the self is being designated. Some schools of thought refers to the consciousness as the aggregates which forms the self. But then if we further search what kind of consciousness is that, whether that consciousness or the mind is during the awake, when one is awake, or is it the mind when something is sleeping? So therefore, if you analyze it through this way, then the consciousness which has been designated as a self by some lower schools, but it's also something which cannot be defined intrinsically. So therefore, the no-selflessness of the phenomena is also basis on the no-selfness of the self or the persons, which in turn is also the consciousness itself does not have its existence or inherent existence. In respect to the observed object of the apprehension of a self of persons, the commentary on the middle way explains that some Samhitas as that part of 5 aggregates and some as that only the mind to be basis or observed object of the view of a self. As for the mind again, Chitwa Matrins and the certain Madhyamikas who assert a mind basis of all assert that mind basis of all is the observed object, and some Madhyamikas such as Baba Viveka who do not assert it, as well as many hearer schools assert that it is the mental consciousness. However, with these systems, when it comes to the meaning invested in the designation person, so when it refers to the self, of course it exists just as a name or as a title, but if you had to find, or if you have to point your finger to, or if you have to find the core of that designated title of the self, then there is no entity, there is no parts or aggregates there from which you can find the self. So when Lama Tsongkhapa refers to here is that he will explain in detail. In the other text, it shows that he will explain, elaborate about this in one of other texts of the 18 volumes commentaries composed by Lama Tsongkhapa. However, with these systems, when it comes to the meaning invested in the designation person, the one cultivating the paths, the one revolving in cyclic existence, and so forth, you need to know the two modes of possessing a mirror, I, and possessing something. And when we speak about I and also the my or something which belongs to you, of course, when we speak about my or mine, there is an object to which you designated the term my. For example, like my wealth and my belongings. When page number 244, and that kind of the when you say the my or mine objects, when you intrinsically view it as existing, then of course that intrinsic reality apprehending apprehending mind also does not look at the self or rather than the objects. And when we speak about conventional or provisional conventional truth, so the first term of conventional, sometimes it means for obscurations, as explained by in the supplement to the mathematical text, that conventional is one which blocks the by seeing the reality nature of the thing. So here the term conventional means to obscurations or blockage. Page number 244, with respect to the innate view of the transitory collection, which is in apprehension of a self. And Chandrakriti has given many logical reasonings for this in the auto commentary of the supplementary to the mathematical text. When we speak that through the first 12 interdependent arises of ignorance, and from the ignorance, then the 12 interdependent link arises. But then there are a few ways of explaining it. And in some respect, the first ignorance, the continuity of the ignorance itself, is something that the later ignorance happened or arises from the previous ignorance. So therefore, the first ignorance ceases by itself through the understanding of reality nature of emptiness, and the continuity of the ignorance also come to a cease. The mind thinking I that arises toward the observed object of the innate view of the transitory collection must arise naturally. When we analyze, when we search the self upon the aggregates, but when we search for the self or the I upon the aggregates, then the reasons or the logical proof that to get the notion of no self through the analyzing of the aggregates, then it's easier to understand the reality nature of emptiness. And when Jesu Sherab Singh, when he gives the teaching, first he used to give the teaching or more emphasizes on the rough nature of no-selflessness. Then as one gets familiar or more accustomed to the no-selflessness in a rough nature, then from there on, in our mind, there is a possibility that we can perceive the self as something which is a mere designated. But again, even though we can look at the self as a mere designated or a name or title, but of course, then we can see there is a possibility that the self can act as a source or an agent of one which undergoes the sufferings and all the activities. And if it is the form, then of course, if we analyze further analysis, then of course we cannot find there is an intrinsic reality of form which does not depend on anything else. And of course nowadays the scientists also, through the quantum physics, there is nothing that we can find a form at the final level, there is nothing to be found as intrinsic nature. Page number 245. This was also taught by the noble Father Rinzin in 70 stanzas on emptiness. And what do we mean by ignorant? And what are the antidotes for ignorance? And it is said that the teachings of dependent originations, through it we can generate the antidotes for ignorance. Page number 245. This was also taught by the noble Father Rinzin in 70 stanzas on emptiness. It says, that which conceives things born from causes and conditions to be real. And here it is not just not to be found the self as an intrinsic reality, but rather we have to clear the doubts of two sides or two nihilism, two extremisms. And as the self, when it appears to you as and exists from itself, then through the meditating or contemplating or getting familiarity with the idea of non-existing from itself, the self, then gradually it arises in our mind that it doesn't exist by itself. To conceive things to be real is to apprehend them as established in reality or truly. This is similar in meaning to a statement from Precious Garland. As long as the aggregates are apprehended, and I will be apprehended in them. Which says that as long as the apprehension of aggregates does not stop, you will not stop the view of the transitory collection. And generally, when we reach the insightful wisdom part of Lamrim Chima, or the great treatise on the path to enlightenment text, then there are a little bit different between the outsetting of the outlines, especially the difference between the two Madhyamika schools. Demonstration that afflicted ignorance is the root of revolving and cyclic existence. This is 6 points. That being so, the ignorance apprehending the two selves explained above is also not the apprehension of the artificial selves of persons and phenomena that were imputed by the uncommon assertions of non-Buddhist and Buddhist tenet systems, a permanent, unitary and independent person. External objects of apprehension, particles that do not have parts such as an eastern side and gross compositions of them, internal apprehending consciousnesses, moments of awareness about time parts such as earlier and later, and a continuum of awareness joining such partless moments together, and self-consciousness that is non-dualistic in terms of being empty of such objects and subjects. Rather, it is the two innate apprehensions of a self that all those whose minds are or are not affected by tenets have in common, that just operated beginninglessly without depending on the minds being affected by tenets. Just that is said to be the root of cyclic existence. Here, in the commentary on the middle way, it says, in those who spend numerous eons unconscious as beasts and do not perceive this unborn permanent something, the apprehension of self is still seen to operate. Through this reasoning, it can be understood that what binds all sentient beings in cyclic existence is innate ignorance. And since artificial ignorance is only present in proponents of tenets, it is inadmissible as the root of cyclic existence. It is extremely important to gain discriminating certainty about this. If you do not understand that, then at the time of settling emptiness by means of the view, you will not know how to hold is the main thing. The ascertainment of the absence of real existence is apprehended by innate ignorance, and how to negate the objects of artificial apprehension is subordinate to that. If you negate the two selves, negating the refutation of the mode of apprehension of innate ignorance, you will ascertain just the selflessness that negates imputation by only the provenance of tenets mentioned earlier. Therefore, at the time of meditation, you will also necessarily meditate on just that, because the ascertainment through the view is for the sake of meditation. Therefore, when you meditate on that selflessness, then it becomes manifest. Even if you take that familiarization to its completion, there will be nothing more to it than just that. Thus, it is very absurd to assert that through seeing the non-existence of the two selves merely as imputed by artificial apprehensions, the innate mental afflictions are solved. In the commentary on the middle way, it says, when you realize selflessness, you abandon the permanent self. That's not ascertained as basis. The two selflessness are base or of emptiness are actually distinguished on the basis of two objects, but not from the subjective perspective. For clarification, this point, the mutual unrelatedness is explained by way of analogy. While seeing a snake in a hole or in the wall of one's house, to make oneself abandon the fear of the snake by clearing up doubt, saying there is no elephant here, Allah's will only be lovable to others. Although this is said with regard to the selflessness of persons, it is the same also with regard to the selflessness of phenomena. 247, page number. When we examine the afflicted emotions through the subtlety, the afflicted emotions, those have the focal objects certain, they are the rough ones. The view of the transitory collection, page number 247. The view of the transitory collection is explained as the root of cyclic existence. The two explanations are contradictory because two discordant roots of cyclic existence are inadmissible. There is no fault. This system distinguishes the true apprehension of a self by means of their observed objects, but there is no difference in the aspect of their mode of apprehension, because both have the aspect of apprehending the object to be established by way of their own character. The contradiction of these two roots of cyclic existence is understood to consist in possessing two modes of apprehension that do not accord in their way of engaging the objects as the roots of cyclic existence. Therefore, when the apprehension of a self or phenomena is taught as the cause of the way of transitory collection, the two internal dimensions of ignorance are being pointed out as cause and effect. When the two are taught as the root of mental afflictions, they are pointed out as the root of all the mental afflictions. When we refer to the afflicted emotions, and afflicted emotions, which are afflicted emotions of focal objects, I think it refers to the rough one, but it's not so clear. Page number 248. Therefore, just as the other four sense powers, eyes and so forth, abide in dependence on the body sense power, rather than abiding in a separate sphere independently, all the other mental afflictions also operate in dependence on innate ignorance, which is why delusion is said to be chief. In order to stop in order to eliminate the afflictions, first we have to understand from what basis the afflicted emotions arises, and it is stated in the fundamental treatise that when the two lower schools argue with Nagarjuna and his text that if there is no intrinsic reality nature of existence, then of course we cannot ascertain the concept of Four Noble Truths and all the basis of the teachings. So therefore, in order to, when the afflicted emotions arises within us, then of course there is a point, the focal object, or there is a point of object from which the affliction arises, which is in itself a kind of intrinsic reality nature. So all these objects from which the afflicted emotion arises, we have to able to look at those focal objects as not being existing by itself. So in nominal there is all the substances existing, but in reality or ultimately there is none of any phenomena or persons or any substances that have intrinsic reality nature of existence. So therefore, if we are able to gain acquaintance or conviction about all the phenomena and factors that it lacks the intrinsic reality natures, then of course all the afflicted emotions which are based on these factors will degenerate it or decline by itself. When page number 248, also in the commentary on the compendium of valid cognition, it says, he who sees a self will always adhere to what he refers to as eyes. Through that adherence there is craving for happiness. Through that craving faults are obscured. Good qualities are seen whereby there is strong craving. What's mine is grasped, that which achieves them. As long as there is attachment to self, one will thus revolve in cyclic existence. You should come to understand it that way. Although this system and the way to apprehension of a self are posited according to the above explanations are not the same, you should come to understand the stages of how the mental afflictions arise in dependence on it. Initially, once the observed object of the thought I is apprehended as established by way of its own character, attachment to the self arises. That generates craving for self's happiness. However, since there is no independent happiness of self that does not depend on mind, there is craving for mind that obscures its fault and causes one to see positive qualities in it. You should train in this manner to gain certainty regarding the stages of revolving cyclic existence. So, His Holiness says it's very important that we have to gain familiarity with all these teachings. So, if I speak plainly, then when Nagarjuna speaks about this, it is not that Nagarjuna write or compose this text as a meant for exam or exams, but rather it is for us to practice. Back to Lamrim Chamo, the Great Treatise on Path to Enlightenment, on page number 125. The actual determination of reality. The section on actual determination, the view of reality, has three parts. Identifying the object to be negated by reasons, whether to carry out that refutation with the Savatantrika procedure or with the Prasangika procedure, how to use that procedure to generate right philosophical view within your mind stream. Identifying the object to be negated by reason has three parts. Why the object of negation must be carefully identified. In order to be sure that a certain person is not person, we must know the absent person. Likewise, in order to be certain of the meaning of selflessness or the lack of intrinsic existence, you must carefully identify the self or intrinsic nature that does not exist. For if you do not have a clear concept of the object to be negated, you will also not have accurate knowledge of its negation. For Shantideva was engaging in the Bodhisattva, it says, without contacting the entity that is imputed, you will not apprehend the absence of that entity. There is limitless diversity among objects of negation, but they come together at the root. When you refute this, you refute all objects of negation. Moreover, if you leave some remainder, failing to refute the deepest and most subtle core of the object of negation, then you will fall to an extreme of true existence. And we have to make a difference that not to find the thing as a reality and do not find the reality nature of things are two different things. So even though they may be existing, but if you analyze or if you find and if you cannot find it as is existing, then it is not the right way. And the scientist also explains, I used to argue with the scientists also that whatever they are not able to find or at this moment does not mean that it does not existing. So whatever things are there existing or present at this time are, of course, there is a valid cognition which perceives it. So there might be two things, that even though the things it may be the phenomenon may be existing by itself, but through the analogical reasonings, through the scientific way, we are not able to find it. For example, the things that were there about 100 years ago, but through the humans' investigation and examining, we are not able to ascertain or we are not able to find those things. But that does not rule out their existence. Even though things are just existing by a mere designated by mind, but not being satisfying to that reality nature of the thing. And if we search for the thing as things from the point of in terms of intrinsically nature existing, then we are not able to find it. So that does not mean that the mere designated title exists of the thing does not exist, but it does not exist. We are on page number 126. Why the object of negation must be carefully identified. In order to be sure that a certain person is not present, you must know the absent person. Likewise, in order to be certain of the meaning of selflessness or the lack of intrinsic existence. The last outline. Refuting other systems that refute without identifying the object to be negated. This is two parts. Refuting an overly broad identification of the object to be negated. Refuting an overly restricted identification of the object to be negated. Most of those who today claim to teach the meaning of Madhyamika say that all phenomena ranging from forms through omniscient consciousness are refuted by the rational analysis of whether production and such exist as their own reality. For one reason, analyzing anything that is put forward, there is not even a particle that can withstand analysis. Also, all four possible ways that something could be produced as an existing effect, a non-existing effect, and so forth are refuted, and there is nothing that is not included in those four. Moreover, these persons assert that a noble being sublime wisdom which perceives reality, perceives production, cessation, bondage, freedom, and so forth as not existing in the least. Therefore, since things must be just as this sublime wisdom knows them, production and such do not exist. When we assert that production and such do exist, these persons ask, are these capable of withstanding rational analysis of their reality? If so, then there would be things that can withstand rational analysis, and thus there will be truly existing things. If not, then how is it possible for something that has been rationally refuted to exist? Similarly, when we hold that production and such exist, this person asks, does valid cognition establish them? If we claim that it does, they reply that since the sublime wisdom perceiving reality perceives production as non-existent, it is impossible for that wisdom to establish production. Further, if we argue that production is established by conventionally visual consciousnesses and such, they reply that it is impossible for such conventional consciousnesses to be valid cognitions that establish production, because scriptural sources refute the claim that those conventional consciousnesses are valid cognitions. The king of concentration Sudra says, the eye, the air, the nose consciousness are not valid cognitions. The tongue, body, and mental consciousness are also not valid cognitions. If this sensory consciousnesses were valid cognitions, of what use to anyone would be the noble beings part B? Also, Chandrakriti's commentary on the middle way says, the world is not valid in any way. They argue that we cannot say that production exists without valid establishment, for we ourselves do not exist this and it is not reasonable. They also argue that if we are able to assert production, since it cannot be asserted ultimately in Madhyamika and we will have to assert it conventionally, but that is unreasonable because Chandrakriti's commentary on the middle way says, the argument which shows that production from self and from other. So as Nagarjuna refers that all these problems that we face is due to the non-understanding of the Tibetan origination. So here is that Tibetan origination is being explained here. Also, they say that if there were production from any of those four, then it will have to be production from a cause, which is something other than the effect, for we do not accept the remaining three. However, this is not reasonable because Chandrakriti's commentary on the middle way says, production from another does not exist even in the world. Therefore, these persons say that you should not add the qualifying word ultimate when refuting production, for Chandrakriti's clear words refuse the addition of this qualification. Among those who argue in this way, there are some who say that they do not accept production and such even conventionally, while others accept that phenomena and such do exist conventionally. However, all of them stick out their necks and argue. It is undeniable that the system of Master Chandrakriti is a rational refutation of essential for intrinsic nature, for he refutes intrinsic existence in terms of both truths. That is, something does not intrinsically exist, how could it may exist? Therefore, adding the qualification ultimate to the object of negation is a procedure only in Sautantrika Madhyamika system. Showing that those systems contradict the unique features of Madhyamika. This is 3 identifying the distinguishing feature of Madhyamika. We are on page number 131. Hence, the distinguishing feature of Madhyamika is the admissibility of all the teachings about cyclic existence and nirvana, the agents and objects of production, refutation, proof, and so forth, in the absence of even a particle of essential or intrinsic nature. The 24th chapter of Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise says, the reduction expressing the fallacy that all is untenable is not right about emptiness. Thus, forsaking emptiness as you have is not right for me. For those to whom emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. For those to whom emptiness does not make sense, nothing makes sense. Nagarjuna says that fallacies added by the ascensionalists such as if all things are empty, there will be no arising and no disintegration, do not apply to those who advocate the absence of intrinsic nature. Moreover, he also says that things such as production and disintegration are tenable within the position of emptiness of intrinsic existence, whereas they are not tenable within the position that phenomena are not empty of intrinsic existence. Chandrakriti's clear word side is that passage and explains, not only does the fallacy expressed in the reductio stated by ascensionalists simply not apply to our position, but it is also the case that within our position all of teachings on the Four Noble Truths, etc. are quite correct. In order to indicate this, Nagarjuna said, for those to whom emptiness makes sense, the 26th chapter of Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise teaches the stages of production in the forward progression of the 12 factors of dependent arising and stages of their cessation in the reverse progression. The 25th chapter mainly refute intrinsic existence. The 24th chapter analyzes the Four Noble Truths. It demonstrates at length that none of the teachings about cyclic existence and nirvana arising in disintegration, etc., make sense in the context of non-emptiness of intrinsic existence, and how all of those who make sense within the context of emptiness of intrinsic existence. Hence, you must know how to carry the implications of this 24th chapter over to other chapters. Therefore, those who currently aim to teach the meaning of Madhyamika are actually giving the position of essentialists when they hold that all causes and effects, such as the agents and objects of production, are impossible in the absence of intrinsic existence. Thus, Nagarjuna, the protector, holds that one must seek the emptiness of intrinsic existence and the middle way on the very basis of teachings of cause and effect, that is, the production and cessation of specific effects in dependence upon specific causes and conditions. The 24th chapter says that which arises dependently we explain as emptiness. This is dependent designation. This is the middle way, because there is no phenomenon that is not a dependent arising. There is no phenomenon that is not empty. Thus, Nagarjuna says that dependent arisings are necessarily empty of intrinsic existence. Do not turn this statement on its head by claiming that what is produced in dependence on causes and conditions must intrinsically exist. Similarly, Nagarjuna refutation objection says, for whom over emptiness makes sense, everything makes sense. For whom over emptiness makes no sense, nothing makes any sense. I bow down to the Buddha, the unequal supreme teacher, who taught that emptiness, dependent arisings, and the middle way hold a single meaning. Also, Nagarjuna's 70 stanzas on emptiness says, the unequal Tathagata taught that because all things are empty of intrinsic existence, things are dependent arising. Also, Nagarjuna's 60 stanzas of reasoning says, those who cling to the self or to the world as though these were not contingent are captivated by extreme views of permanent and impermanence. Those who claim that dependent things exist in reality, how can they avoid the fallacies of permanence and so forth? Those who hold that contingent things like a moon reflected in water are neither real nor unreal, they are not captivated by such wrong views. Also, Nagarjuna's praise of the Transcendent One says, logicians claim that suffering is produced from itself, or from something other, or from both of those, or without a cause. You said it arises dependently. You hold that whatever arises dependently is empty. There is nothing to match your raw. Things do not exist on their own. Thus, Nagarjuna says it is precisely because of being dependent arisings that phenomena are empty of intrinsic existence. This explanation that dependent arising is the meaning of emptiness, that is to say, the absence of intrinsic existence, is a unique system of Nagarjuna, the protector. Therefore, dependent arising does not mean accepting emptiness, the absence of intrinsic existence for oneself as a Madhyamika, while living teachings on dependently arising cause and effect to others because one is uncomfortable with having them in one's system. For Nagarjuna's statement in the fundamental treatise, for those to whom emptiness makes sense, means that all of the dependent arising of cyclic existence and nirvana are admissible in a system that teaches the absence of intrinsic existence. We are on page number 137. 137. 138 now, sorry. What will help you to find the right view? As a basis, you should be pure in upholding your ethical commitments. Then strive in many ways to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom and clear away obscurations. Rely on the learned, making efforts to study and to reflect upon their instructions. Since certainty about appearance and certainty about emptiness almost never develop together, it is extremely difficult to find the Madhyamika view. This is what Nagarjuna meant in the 24th chapter of the Fundamental Treatise. Therefore, knowing that those of limited intelligence would have difficulty understanding the depths of his teachings, the mind of the sage turned away from giving this teaching. Nagarjuna's precious Ganden says, when the impurity of the teachings, which is coarse and indirectly observable and continually appearing, do not stay with the mind, then how could the excellent teaching, which has no basis, is not immediately apparent and is more subtle and profound, easily come to mind? Realizing that because of its profundity, this teaching is difficult to understand, this sage, when he became a Buddha, turned away from giving this teaching. Thus, treatises and scriptures stated that it's very difficult to understand the profound view. Failing to reach such knowledge of both appearance and emptiness, some mistake the meaning of statements in certain authoritative texts that demonstrate the absence of intrinsic existence by rational analysis of whether poles and such are one way different from their parts, analyzing whether something such as a pot is any of its parts, such as its leaf or neck. They do not find it to be any of those. This leads them to a sense of certainty that there is no pot here. Then, applying the same analysis to the analyzer, they become certain that there's also no analyzer here. They then wonder, if the analyzer is not to be found, then who is it that knows that pots and such do not exist? So they say things are neither existing nor non-existence. If the false certainty brought on you by this sort of counterfeit reasonings we consider a case of finding the Madhyamika view, then gaining that view would seem to be the easiest thing in the world. Therefore, intelligence should develop an unshakable certainty that the very meaning of emptiness is dependent arising. This is what is said in the definitive scriptures and in the pure Madhyamika text, the treatise that comment on the intended meaning of those definitive scriptures. This is the distinguishing feature of the Madhyamika, but specifically this is a subtle point that the noble Nagarjuna and spiritual son Aryadeva had in mind, and upon which the master Buddha Palita and the glorious Chandrakriti gave fully comprehensive commentary. This is how dependent arising bestows certain knowledge of the absence of intrinsic existence. This is how it dawns on you. It is things which are devoid of intrinsic existence that are causes and effects. How those systems contradict this distinguished feature of Madhyamika. Thus, the system of Nagarjuna, the protector, is that phenomena do not have even a particle of essential or intrinsic nature. Also, if there were intrinsic existence, then all of the teachings on cyclic existence and nirvana will be impossible. Since it is inappropriate not to give those teachings, all the teachings on bondage, freedom, etc. should be set forth. Thus, you definitely must accept the absence of intrinsic existence. However, you misinterpreters of Madhyamika seem to say As things have no essential or intrinsic nature, then what else is there? Therefore, it is not necessary to add a qualification such as ultimate. So tomorrow is the parinirvana of Lama Tsongkhapa. So falling on the Tibetan month, 25th day of Tibetan month. So tomorrow morning we will have a special prayer composed by Khyentse Rinpoche, the 3 levels, and Lama Tsongkhapa's secret realizations praise composed by Jangchup Lamrim, and also another prayer composed by first Dalai Lama Ganden Truba. So after that we can also pray well, and that may all never be separated from the practice of bodhicitta, and may we also be guided by those masters, and also may we have all the necessary things to be able to benefit all the sentient beings. So in this way, if we are able to make some good prayers, and of course it will be very beneficial. By the merits accumulated through the teachings, may all the teachings of Buddha spread to all parts of the world. So the Lamrim Chimpa great treatise on the spiritual path to enlightenment. So we have come to the 3rd paragraph. This is how it dawns on you that it is things which are devoid of intrinsic existence that are causes and effects. So tomorrow we'll be continuing from here. Thank you. Prayer for the lineage of Lamrim masters. By accumulating through long effort the 2 collections as vast as the sky, may I become the chief of the conquerors, guide of all beings whose minds are blinded by ignorance. Also in all lives until I reach that point, may Manjugosha look after me with loving kindness. After I find the supreme path, completed the stages of teaching, by accomplishing it, may I please the conquerors. By skill in means inspired by strong loving kindness, may the vital points of the path that I precisely know clear away the mental darkness of beings. May I then uphold the conqueror's teachings for a long time. In regions where the supreme precious teachings have not spread, or where it has spread but then declined, may I illuminate that treasure of happiness and benefit with a mind deeply moved by great compassion. May this treatise on the stages of path to enlightenment, well founded on the wondrous deeds of conquerors and their children, bring glory to the minds of those who want to be free and long preserve the conqueror's achievements. As for all who provide conditions that support integration of the good path and clear away conditions that inhibit their integrations, whether they are human or not, may they never be separated in all their lifetimes from the pure path praised by the conquerors. When I strive to properly achieve the supreme vehicle through the 10 deeds of the teaching, may I be accompanied always by those who have power, and may an ocean of good fortune pervade all directions. The prayer of the words of truth, Mamoradnatraya, homage to the triple gems in magnificent masters of an ocean of limitless good qualities, those gone to the bliss of 3 times, your children and disciples. Looking our destitute microids like your only child, please pay attention to my true words of sorrow. Expand the doctrine of the completely perfected, capable one, which removes the sufferings of psychic existence, solitary peace, for abundant, extensive welfare and happiness in Jambudeva. Increase the 10 kinds of Dhamma, contribute all those learned and accomplished holders of the doctrine. By pacifying all the unbearable dangers of sickness, weapons, and famine, cause those migrators totally compelled by intolerance, strong karma, stricken by the torture of sufferings without respite, to recover their breath in an ocean of happiness and joy. Particularly for all the migrator beings in the religious snowland oppressed with evil actions by the barbarian hordes from the black side of devoid of love, may your power of compassion arise and quickly stop the flow of blood and tears. May all the unruly groups of people, maddened by demon afflicted emotions, who by their rough behavior in themselves and others fully obtain the eye which sees their object of compassion, and obtain magnificent love, kindness, and affection, the wish that since long time dwells in our heart is a glorious, complete freedom for the entire Tibetan community. Best to assume the fortune to enjoy the celebration of spontaneous religion and secular harmony. All the people who completely give up their cherished body, life, and possessions and endure hundreds of hardships for the sake of the doctrine, its holders, their country, and their comparators, may they be guarded by compassion of the protector of the Padala. In short, may the good fruit of any extensive prayer to fully protect the land of snows, made by the powerful protector Chenrezig in the presence of the Buddhas and their children, appear soon here and now, by the interdependence of the profound suchness of the appearance and the emptiness, by the power of the three sublime compassion and the force of truth, may our prayer of truth be fulfilled soon and without obstacles. As long as their spirit remains and as long as there are sentient beings to benefit, may I too remain to dispel the sufferings of the sentient beings.